Hello, everybody. We're going to take a few minutes as people get logged in. I'm going to take 1 minute. All right. We're going to go ahead and start our webinar. Thank you so much for coming. Good afternoon. My name is Chach Duarte White, and I'm here with Mojde Oskuyan. And we are hoping to talk to you about the Immigrant Safety Plan and also some immigration questions and know your rights. Please ask questions throughout the webinar and chat, and we'll answer at the end. Don't share personal information or ask case-specific questions. I'm also going to say this in Spanish in case anybody is speaking Spanish afterwards. To access captions in your language, go to the bottom ribbon and click the captions button. Click the translation toggle button on, then select English as a speaking language and your desired language as the caption language. Bienvenidos a todos, estoy aquí, me llamo Chach Duarte White y estoy aquí con Mojde Oskuyan y ahora vamos a hablar del plan para los inmigrantes, los jóvenes, y también información sobre inmigración. Por favor, hagan preguntas a lo largo del seminario web en el chat y responderemos al final. Por favor, no comparten información personal ni hagan preguntas específicas de cada caso. Para acceder a los subtítulos en su idioma, vaya a la cinta inferior y haga clic en el botón subtítulos. Hagan clic en el botón de alternancia traducción. Luego seleccionan el inglés como idioma hablado y el idioma que desees como idioma de los subtítulos. Gracias. For all of you to know, this is being recorded, and so we will post it at a later time. At this point, I am going to go ahead and share my screen so that you all can see my slide. And then also, Mojde will be asking me questions at the end. And then at that point, we will switch over to Mojde's screen and she will be doing her part and informing you on immigration issues. And then I will ask her questions that come up in the chat. All right, here we go. Sharing screen. All right, give me 1 second while I go to the slideshow. All right. Let me see if I can turn this off. All right, we should put that up there. All right. Welcome, everybody. Today we are talking about the Immigrant Safety Plan, and this is the Train the Trainers. As I said, I am Chach Duarte White. I'm the Director of Legal Services at Legal Counsel for Youth and Children, and Mojde Oskuyan is from Northwest Immigrant Rights Project. Today's overview and objectives regarding the Immigrant Safety Plan is to talk about the overview of what is in the plan, and then the contents, and then resources. I am going to go through these slides fairly quickly, but we will also have them available so that you can review them. What is the safety plan? Why do we need it? What's the goal? Who is it for? What do we do with it? And the limitations and how can you help? I'm going to quickly talk about why I came up with the safety plan. I wrote it with a lot of help from other people. I originally wrote it in 2017, and I wrote it for my mother. My mom passed away 15 years ago, but she was an immigrant. She had a 6th grade education. English was not her first language, and she had limited English. And I know that if there were raids and she was to be picked up, she did have a legal permanent residence, she had a green card, but if she was picked up, she would have been worried about what happens to my children. Therefore, I wrote this for someone who would be in that situation. While she was married to my father had a high school education. He spoke English. He was an American citizen, and his parents were from Mexico, but he also could be detained because he was racially profiled quite a bit. So I also wrote it for him so that he could help her fill out the paperwork and they could fill out the paperwork together. So it's supposed to be in very much plain language. And the idea is if you are detained or deported, what happens to your children and who can care for them in order for them to either get placed back with you in a foreign country or another third person can care for them. There are limitations to it, and then we'll also talk about how can you help. The goal of the safety plan is to gather all the important documents of the child. There are many important documents that are not easy to obtain without a parent's signature. The other thing is to prepare a third party, not a parent. So when I talk about a parent, that's the person on the birth certificate, not a parent, to care for the child in the event that the parent is detained or deported. This is kind of one of these things. We are preparing the safety plan. We would rather not use it. It's almost like an earthquake plan. We don't want to have to use it, but if in the event that it happens, you will be prepared for your children. We want to give the rights of the parents to a third party to care for the child while the parent is not available. And then we want to plan to put the child in the best possible position if the parent is unavailable for the child. How does a parent pick a third party? Generally, it has to be someone over the age of 18. And when we're talking about children, we're talking about minors, anyone under the age of 18. So your third party that's going to care for your minor child needs to be someone over the age of 18. They should be documented, ideally a US citizen. They have to be able to care for the child emotionally, financially, and however else the parent would like. They should be local in order to physically get the child in the event that the parent isn't available to pick the child up, and someone who will carry out the parent's wishes when it comes to the child. The safety plan contains information on how to get school and daycare emergency contact information. This is very important. The safety plan is on our LCYC website. It was just updated yesterday. School and daycare emergency contact information is important because if the person, the third party, for example, if I name my brother as the person to care for my children, if his name is not with a school or a daycare, then he cannot pick up my children. They will not release my children to him. So this has to be updated with every school or daycare. Every school or daycare has a different form or an electronic place where you have to update that information. So please contact your local school or daycare to update that. Immunization and medical records. This is important to have for every child, the latest immunization and medical records so that the child can go to school and so that people know what their records are. If the child has any allergies or any medical issues, it is very important for this third party to know what are those issues. In addition to medication. We're also going to talk about intention of the parents for care for the minor child. So that's what's two important documents, the intention and then a durable power of attorney. And then we're going to talk about birth certificates, social security cards, and passports. School and daycare emergency contact information. As I mentioned, who's going to pick up the child and who will make the child's decisions for the child every school has a different form, and the decisions for the child will probably be education, travel, and medical decisions. Immunization and medical records. Make sure they are up to date. If children have not been immunized and they need to do so in order to be in school, make sure they are up to date and all their medical records up to date. In addition, you'll want to list the names and contact information of each doctor, dentist, so that a third party knows where to take your child. If you have other specialists, such as allergists, eye doctors, or have special needs, you'll want to include all of that information. What to do when parents want to happen to the child if they are detained or deported. So the intention of parents for care of a minor child is a document in the safety plan that basically explains what the parent would like to have happen in the event that the parent is detained or deported. The child will remain in the residential care of whom? And it should be someone with status, ideally a relative, someone geographically close to the child. And then you want to put the contact information on the lines below. And then you can write in other plans. So the way you want to think about it, if I have a child who's 8 years old and is at school and I am detained, I have given this information in the intention to my brother. My brother would go to the school and it would say my brother can pick up the child. But for example, if I was deported to another country, I might want my 8-year-old to be reunited with me. So then in that intention, you could write in there, I eventually want that child to be reunited with me. So hopefully everybody will be on board so that the child gets reunited with me. If it's in another home country, you need to put contact information on the lines in the intention of that home country. If I am being deported to Mexico, then I need address and phone numbers in Mexico. How do they find me? If you are not there, maybe it is a relative. Maybe it is someone else that can actually find you. So give the information so they know how to find you. If one parent is not available, so the parents are the people on the birth certificate. If there is no father on the birth certificate, then only one parent needs to sign that, the mother. If one parent is not available, you can sign later with a notary, or if the parent is not present at the time of the document signing, you can have the parent also sign in front of two witnesses. Ideally, we want people to notarize these documents or have two witnesses sign. If the parent is not available at all and they are on the birth certificate, it's possible this document may not be honored. We don't know. The other really important document in the Immigrant Safety Plan is the durable power of attorney for parental powers. So this actually transfers the intentions legally. This gives the third party, the non-parent, the ability to make education, medical, and travel decisions for the child. This person should also be listed at the school and the daycare and the intention. When you sign a power of attorney, it is effective upon signature. So I realized that if I'm the parent and I sign that over to my brother could then go pick up my children. However, I hopefully have trust in my brother that he's not going to pick them up unless something happens to me. It also is a revocable document. So if my brother did that, I can revoke the document by writing to him that it is now revoked. This document, a power of attorney, expires 24 months after it is signed by the parent. Therefore, if you have one, it may not be viable anymore if it was done within the last 2 years. Ideally, if people filled them out in 2017, when we first had Trump first came into term, then they probably are no longer good. If your child turned 18, then you don't have to worry about it. But in the meantime, if you have children who are minors and your signature is only good for 2 years after you sign it, you can just do a brand new documents in order to have new and current ones. Again, if one parent is not available, they can sign later with a notary. And if the parent is not available at all, it may not be honored. You can either notarize these documents or 2 witnesses must sign when the parent signs. The idea is these documents do not need a lawyer to be done. Anybody can do them. And so our hope is that everybody will spread the word of the Immigrant Safety Plan and help the community fill these out for their children. Birth certificates, get them. I know some people think they have original copies. They may not have original copies. Make sure the spelling and names are accurate and consistent. Check to see if there's a mother and father listed. If one parent is listed, that's the only parent that needs to sign the intention and the power of attorney, unless a family court order states otherwise. Each state has a different process, so this presentation and our immigrant safety plan is specific to Washington state. If you have a birth certificate from another country and you need to replace it, work with your consulate. For US birth certificates, there's a fee and it could be up to $40.50. Social Security cards. So this applies to US citizens. Many immigrants might have children who are US citizens. It requires an original or certified copy of identification, and they need to prove identity of the child and the parent. If the parent does not have status, it should not matter, and nobody should be reporting or asking the parent about this. So you should get Social Security cards for your child if they are American citizens, and there is no fee. If you've misplaced the Social Security card, or you don't feel like you ever got one and the child was born in the United States, you should try and get a replacement Social Security card. Passports. US citizens, if your child is a US citizen, try to get them as soon as possible. They're very hard to get without a parent's signature. And if the parent is detained or deported, the child can't get the parent's signature in order to get the passport. And you'll need them for the child if they travel outside of the US and they want to get back into the United States. It requires signatures for both parents or an affidavit from the missing parent at the appointment, and they have to be done in person. You need to prove citizenship. You have to have passport photos. They are very expensive. The fees are around $105. If it is possible and people can afford getting passports, you should encourage people to get them. If the child is from another country, it is possible that they'll need this passport if the child needs to travel outside of the US. So they should get the passport from their home country, and they should work with the consulate in order to get that passport. It also serves as identification for possible benefits in that country. In the Immigrant Safety Plan, you will see different contact information for some of the most common countries that we think may be impacted, and you can look up who to call in the packet. What do we do with all of this paperwork once we gather it? So we want people to create a file, a shoebox, or a place that will hold all of this paperwork for each child. So this is important to know. Each child should have their own separate file of paperwork. What that means is when you do the intention of the parents and the durable power of attorney, you don't want to list multiple children on one document. What may happen is if one child is undocumented, you may out another child if they're all on the same document. You also may want to have different children doing different things depending how old they are. For example, if you have a 2-year-old baby, that child you might want to be reunited with you in your home country. If you have another child who is 17, you may want that child to stay with a relative and finish out their high school career in the United States. And then once they turn 18, you do not have the power to tell that child technically what to do anymore anyway. So this, again, we want to create a file or a shoebox or some place that will hold all of the paperwork for the child. You want to put all the originals here, except for the intention and the power of attorney. We also want to create an electronic copy if possible. Please ask people not to put them on their phone. These are very important documents. We don't want social security cards. We don't want intentions or power of attorneys on their phone if their phone is lost. We also suggest making 3 copies of the intention and power of attorney. The original should go to the third-party caregiver. That way, if the third-party caregiver, if you are detained, the third-party caregiver has the original documentation. 1 copy for the parent to put in the file, and then the other copy should go with the child. Now, if your child is old enough to understand what might happen, you could provide a child the document so that in the event, let's say, they are left at school and they're 15 years old and they need to then go to the dentist, they can provide that to the third-party caregiver and say this third party is the one who's responsible. If the child is young and doesn't have the capacity to do that, you could copy it and fold it, put it in a plastic bag because it rains in Washington, and maybe someone will find that document in the event that you don't pick your child up. Where this comes into play is, let's say your child is at daycare and they're 3 years old and nobody picks your child up because you were detained or deported. You're detained. Somebody is going to have to call who's on the emergency notifications. But if nobody can get a hold of anyone, they might look through the diaper bag and see, oh, here's this power of attorney. This person is the one who has power of attorney for this child. The other reason is if no one comes to pick up your child, what the daycare workers are going to have to do is call the police. The police are going to call CPS. CPS is then going to try to figure out what to do with your child. And hopefully they find this piece of paper and know to call the person who is listed on that intention and the power of attorney. Make sure that all interested parties have access to the paperwork, especially the caregiver and the child, if the child is old enough to understand. When I say this, if I'm detained and I live in an apartment with my children, and let's pretend I'm a solo parent, my brother has to have the ability to get into my apartment and get to that file, to that shoebox, because he might need to access my children's passports. So then he's going to need a copy of the key to get into my apartment. If he goes to the landlord to get into my apartment, that landlord can't let my brother into my apartment. So you have to plan for that, the the third party has to be able to access this file. Tricky situations. This is a tough topic to talk about. This is hard. People are emotional, they're scared. Parents do not want to think about, if I'm detained, what happens to my children? On the other hand, it is something they could prepare for now. They can think about, who can take care of my children, even in the short term or in the long term, and to make sure that they are safe. What we don't want is for children to be put in foster care if there are family members or people that can care for them, when people just didn't know. So the hope is that we get them to who the parents want to care for them. The question on, do I need to notarize? Technically, you don't need to notarize. It is a stronger document generally if you do notarize it, but you can also have two witnesses. Does this transfer legal custody? It does not transfer legal custody. In order to transfer custody of a minor child, it is a whole different process that requires going to court and getting specific orders. It is a temporary fix. If a parent is not available, if two parents are on the birth certificate and you don't know where one of the parents is, it's going to be challenging because both parents need to sign that document. However, you can include, if someone passed away, you can include a death certificate. If you don't know how to actually get in touch with the other parent, you can write in that you don't know how to get in touch with them, but it's not clear if it will be valid. The other thing is, if you have any special court orders, such as a parenting plan, a protection order against the other parent, you should include those documents so that people can figure out who is supposed to be with your children. Dual citizen children, if possible, you want to get Social Security cards, birth certificates from both countries, and passports. What happens if the people don't have a third party available? Then the reality is, if no one picks up your child, at some point the police will be called and CPS will need to get involved. What happens if CPS gets involved? Well, they are going to try to figure out where to place your child with a family member if possible, but there's no guarantee that's going to happen right away. They have to have the child go somewhere that day, that night. And it's already going to be traumatizing enough that their parent was detained, and we would like to avoid them having to go to foster care. The other issue is that many children may not speak the language where they go to foster care. So that also might be worse for the child. How can you help us? Spread the word. The Immigrant Safety Plan is on our website. It is free. Anybody can fill it out. You don't have to be an attorney. You don't have to go to court. Please tell people to use it. We are in the process of getting it translated to Spanish so that people could line it up with the English version and then read it in Spanish and fill it out in English. You need to fill out the intention and the power of attorney in English, if possible, because that is what people know how to read. Help people fill out the ISP and collect documents. If you're an English speaker, you can help people do this. Share know your rights information. Share the information that Mojdeh is about to tell you about. Help people because they are scared of what may happen. The other thing you could do is donate and volunteer. Here is our link to our donation page. We right now do not have funding for this work, but we know it's really important. And then if you're interested in being a pro bono for us, or you're interested in volunteering, you can also go to our link and help us there. Important contacts, Northwest Immigrant Rights Project, and then, or if someone has an immigration attorney, they need to memorize that number so that they can call their immigration attorney. Consulate's important contact, and the third party, knowing their names and knowing their phone numbers. People put their numbers in their phone nowadays and don't memorize phone numbers. If they are detained, they are not going to have access to that phone. WISN, Washington Immigrant Solidarity Network, is also an important contact to have, and also a great place that has a lot of resources. As I said, important phone numbers. These are NIRPS numbers, knowing your immigration attorney, third party, and then there's also a hotline for WISN. Resources, there are many resources out there. LCYC, Legal Counsel for Youth and Children, that's where the Immigrant Safety Plan is. Northwest Immigrant Rights Project. Washington Law Help has a lot of documents if people need them. And Washington Immigrant Solidarity Network. Again, this Immigrant Safety Plan is specifically written for Washington State. If you're from another state, you can adapt it to your state, but this one is written with Washington State laws in mind. Questions? And here's my contact information in the event that you are doing some training or have a tricky situation. You could send me email, and I'm happy to try to respond to people, although it might not be immediate. I'm going to stop sharing.
All right, Judge, we have quite a few questions in the chat. For some extremely strange reason, I cannot get my video to work, which is going to be a bit of a problem. Rex, help, please. But so here are the questions that we have while I try to figure out what's going on.
It should be fixed now, Marcia.
Thank you. I'm here. Thank you so much, Rex. So the first question that we have is, what is the specific document which needs to be signed and or witnessed? I believe you sort of answered this. Where can we get hold of these legal documents? I believe on your website. And what are the requirements for who can be a witness?
Oh, that's great questions. Okay, you can get them from our LCYC website, and I am going to ask Emily probably to post it in the chat, the link to our website. And then as far as the documents, the two big ones are the intention of the parents. What would the parents like to have done with the child? And then we also broke it out so that you could just download the intention and just the power of attorney. The other one is the durable power of attorney. For witnesses, I believe you only have to be over the age of 18 and be there when the parent signs.
Awesome, thank you. Next question is, what if one parent is a citizen? What are the rights of the undocumented parent? What if there is domestic violence?
Okay, if you have both parents on the birth certificate, what happens if one parent is not available? The other parent has all the rights that the other parent had. So whichever parent is around can take the children and raise them. That is their right. If there is an issue with domestic violence or issues between the parents, then you really need to file a family law court action and get a parenting plan. If there is domestic violence, you need to file a protection order to protect those children, and you can list their children in a protection order.
Thank you, Judge. The next question is in the same vein. What if the parent with the children has fled the other parent for safety reasons, but does not have a protection order or other legal document showing this situation? What is the best way to indicate this on the paperwork?
Yes, that's also an excellent question. The reality is you can write it on the paperwork, but nobody necessarily has to believe it, or there's no proof of it. What I honestly think you should do is you need to file a protection order so that there is an actual document that they can refer to, and a judge has ordered that, yes, that person should not be with the children.
Thank you. And the next question is, can children born in the US with immigrant parents get US passports?
Yes.
And what about for non-biological children in the care of undocumented adults? For example, nieces, young siblings, or other unaccompanied youth?
So if you have children who are not with the parents, you can do a power of attorney right now, and that will give that person, the third party, the same powers. If you want, but it only lasts for 24 months. You can renew it after 24 months. If you want something more permanent until the child turns 18 years old, you would have to file what's called a minor guardianship and get full guardianship of the child, which is a family court. It's a court order that is done now in family courts or dependencies or probates.
Thank you, Judge. There is a related question that the order is good for 2 years, but can it be for a shorter duration?
If it wants to be time limited, I think you can go ahead and strike. You can include this will expire on and just write it in.
Great, thank you. The next question is in Spanish, so bear with me. Si estás en proceso de arreglo, casado con ciudadanía americano y te llega a detener, ICE pueden deportarte.
Esa es una pregunta de inmigración y vamos a tener que preguntarle a Mojde. It's an immigration question, and we're going to have to ask Mojde. So I'll have to translate that question for you, Mojde.
What do you recommend if a parent has already been deported? What is the process then to get the kid's passport? And let's say the parent deported isn't responsive. The kids are US citizens, and the remaining parent is undocumented or in DACA status.
That is really hard, because if one parent is not responsive, I believe the only way I know how to do it is to get an affidavit from that parent in order to provide it to the passport people. I don't know the answer to that, and I actually don't, unless somebody else knows in the chat, I don't think you can get a passport, which is a problem. The only other way, if the parent is non-responsive, you could file for full custody of the child, and then you can file and get the passport yourself because you have 100% custody of them. But that requires a family law action.
Thank you. The next question is, when revoking a power of attorney, must that also be notarized, or can it be simply a written communication between the parties?
Technically, it could be a simple communication with the parties. However, if the person who has the children wants to argue that you didn't write it, they might be able to, but it could be just written communication. But generally what the notarizing does is it proves that that person was the one who actually signed it and wrote it.
Sorry. How do we know if a foreign birth certificate is authentic and belongs to the child? Is it okay to have copies of these documents, or do we ask the parents to give us the originals?
That is a good question. I don't know how you know if it's authentic. I think you would have to go to your consulate and make sure that you present the document and say, is this authentic? Because every country is different. I would say, generally speaking, parents should hold their children's birth certificates, or if the child is old enough, 17, the child should hold their birth certificate, the original. You don't want to be giving out original birth certificates to other people.
Great. And one more question. Can you maybe talk a little bit about RCW 28A.601.101 that no child can be taken out of school, off school property, except if a parent gives permission. For example, if ICE came to the school.
So I assume that someone's asking, can ICE take an undocumented child out of school? That gets complicated because of whether ICE can even go into schools. And so I'm going to probably defer to Mojde on that. Mojde, do you have a better answer than I do?
Yeah, we will touch base on this, the sanctuary, Washington State Sanctuary City State and the current safety zones, which is a federal policy, in just a few moments.
Great.
All right. Thank you so much, Judge.
Thank you.
See if I can start my PowerPoint presentation. Do you guys see this?
I sure do. You're on the constitutional rights slide.
Oh, thank you so much.
Yeah.
All right. So, as Judge mentioned, my name is Mojde Hoskuyan, and today we just wanted to talk for just a quick few minutes about who we are at NERP, what services we provide, how to contact us. Then we are going to spend just a bit of time talking about basic concepts in immigration law, but I just want to make sure that you all are aware this is not Immigration 101. That is a much longer presentation, and it would not fit in today's time frame. However, we have those presentations online if you're interested. Then we are going to talk quickly, and the incoming administration's fear-mongering tactics. The idea here is not to instill fear, but the exact opposite, to say that most of what the incoming administration has threatened to do cannot be done immediately. But then we will also talk about what they can do, and how do our immigrant community members in Washington State are impacted. Then we will do the Know Your Rights, of course. We will talk about the resources, just a heads up. A lot of the resources that I am going to share are the same resources that Chad shared. And both our organizations think WISE and Washington Immigrant Solidarity Network is the place to go. And towards the end, of course, hopefully we will have enough time to take some questions. So a little bit about NERP. NERP is the only organization in Washington State that provides comprehensive immigration legal services to our low-income community members. All of our services are free. Our focus, our bread and butter, is on direct representation. However, we also recognize the importance of impact litigation. This is when we sue the government, and we do that quite often. I will give an example or two, in a bit. We do community education like today, and we do advocacy with our legislators. We have 4 offices. 2 of our offices are in Western Washington, Seattle and Tacoma. And our Tacoma office actually opened in response to the opening of the Northwest Detention Center, and initially only worked with the detained population. But we are very happy to say that it has now expanded and it provides various services, although the concentration is still on assisting the detained community members in Washington State. We also have two offices in Eastern Washington, our Granger office and our Wenatchee office, who provide services, a variety of services, to our Eastern Washington community members. So what services do we provide? We provide consultations, and by that we mean that we sit down one-on-one with individual community members. We discuss their case in detail. And we let them know if they are eligible for any form of immigration relief. We provide them information. As I noted previously, our bread and butter, we provide direct representation, full representation. This is what we would love to do for every single community member who comes through our door. Sadly, because the need is so much greater than our resources, that is not always possible. So in order to assist as many community members as possible, we also provide limited services. For example, if there are various steps in an individual's case, we let them know that we will assist you with this particular step in your case, and then we will re-evaluate at a later time if we can assist you more. But at the moment, this is what we are planning to do. And if we are not able to do that, then we provide pro se assistance, which means that we actually assist the community member in submitting the application by making sure that making sure they know how to complete the application fully and correctly. And of course, we provide community presentations and workshops. This is how to contact us. Each of our offices has its own email address and phone number. This is on our website. Please feel free to contact us. And we are moving forward with the basic concepts in immigration law. So, what departments are we dealing with here? Generally speaking, we are dealing with three different departments. We are dealing with the Department of Homeland Security, DHS. DHS is an umbrella department with many, many agencies. However, the three that we are concerned about are CIS, Citizenship and Immigration Services. We call that the customer service arm of DHS. Generally, affirmative applications go to this agency. Then we have ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement. ICE enforces immigration laws within the United States. And then we have CBP, Customs and Border Protection, which enforces this country's immigration laws at the border. We also have the Department of State, and our community members work with the Department of State when they have either themselves or someone they have applied for has to go to a consulate to interview for a visa and obtain one. And last but not least, we have the Department of Justice, where we are talking about immigration courts and the Board of Immigration Appeal, which comes into play when either the community member or government's attorney wants to appeal an immigration judge's ruling. A word about our immigration court and the removal process. In Washington State, we have two separate courts. One is in Seattle, and it hears cases of non-detained community members. And then we have the Tacoma Immigration Court that deals solely with the detained population at the Northwest Detention Center. I'm sure many of you know, but there is no right to counsel in immigration proceedings, and which means that, most of the community members are forced to represent themselves. I think in Washington State, only about 35% of community members have legal counsel, meaning the rest of them are representing themselves. In the detained context, this is a lot worse. 90% of our detained community members go before an immigration judge without representation. If you think that it is 10 times more likely for a case to be granted for a detained community member if they are represented, and 5 times more likely for a non-detained community member if they're represented, you'll see what a difference it makes. And it just makes sense, right? Especially in a detained context, because, I mean, the community member cannot access their document, cannot communicate with family members, expert witnesses, cannot get documents from doctors anyway. So it makes a huge difference if community members have an immigration attorney. Sadly, most of them don't. So that was about the departments really quickly. I realized this. Now let's talk about different forms of status, right? The most obvious one is U.S. citizens, of course. So a person is a U.S. citizen if they were either born in the United States or naturalized, like myself, meaning that, you know, through some kind of petition, you became a lawful permanent resident, and then after waiting for a certain period of time, you applied to become a citizen. Or they acquired or derived citizenship through a parent, or in some exceptional circumstances through a grandparent. So that is one form of status. Another form of status is to be a non-citizen with legal status. For example, lawful permanent residents, right? Green card holders. That's the status. We put asylees and refugees in this bucket just because an asylee and refugee can obtain residency, can obtain their green card really quickly after they obtain their asylee or refugee status, so within a year generally. So they can get it really quickly, which is why we add them to our green card holder status. One thing, and perhaps many of you know this, but just to make sure everyone knows, the difference between an asylee and a refugee is where you obtain that status, right? So an asylee obtains the status in the United States. They have come to the United States and they're applying for asylum. A refugee generally obtains their refugee status in a third country, right? So they have left the home country because of a fear. They're in the third country. Refugees have to wait many, many years sometimes and go through multiple security screenings before they can obtain their refugee status. United States currently has a cap of 125,000 refugees annually. So 125,000 refugees can enter the United States. But just to prepare you, during Trump 1.0, the administration then dropped the refugee cap to 15,000 annually. So the refugee cap can drop. And then, so that was the status, sorry. So we have the US citizen, the non-citizen, and then we have people who have temporary legal statuses. We call this the alphabet soup. So for example, the students who enter on an F1 visa, temporary workers who enter on H1, we have visitors and tourists who enter on a B1, B2. We have people who have temporary protected status. Note that many in our community have lived in this community for decades under the status. And then we have various forms of humanitarian relief like U visas, T visas, VAWA, and others. And then we have the undocumented. And our undocumented community members are either people who entered the United States with a visa and then overstayed, or they entered by crossing the border. The reason we insist on using undocumented instead of, God forbid, alien, not, from other word, or illegal, is because, for one thing, nobody is illegal. And for another, many of our community members who may currently be undocumented actually may be eligible for some form of relief that they can apply for. So that's for the types of status. This slide talks about how can we obtain a green card, right? So most in our immigrant community obtain green card through a family member, right? So a lawful permanent resident spouse or U.S. citizen spouse apply for their spouse. Adult child applies for their parent. U.S. citizen siblings apply for a U.S. citizen sibling and will have to wait in line for 20 years, but we won't talk about that. So most are through family. But one thing that we want to mention here is that although it is possible to obtain residence green card through a family member, we want to make sure people are aware of multiple requirements, right? So a family member, a U.S. citizen or lawful permanent resident, can submit a petition for their qualifying family member, right? And that petition can be approved. But then the beneficiary of this petition will need to apply for adjustment of status, right? So that's the second step. And in order to be eligible to apply for adjustment of status, this person has to demonstrate that they are admissible and meet the eligibility and admissibility requirements, which are like a lot, right? But one important one is that they entered lawfully or under parole, right? So if either yourselves or somebody you know in the community believes that either themselves or a friend or family may be eligible, but not certain, we definitely suggest that they do a consultation with an immigration attorney. The other way that individuals obtain their green card is through employment visa, H-1Bs. And then, of course, as we discussed previously, through asylum and refugee status. And then we have other forms of relief also. So diversity visa is the visa lottery, and humanitarian protections like Violence Against Women's Act. Remember, it applies to everybody, not just women, and U visas and T visas. All right. So this slide, we wanted to make sure we discuss. This is for community members who have arrived in the United States recently, right? One thing that we have noticed might be an issue is that, generally speaking, many of the recently arrived community members are coming through the southern border, right? So chances are that they interacted with either CBP or ICE somewhere in the southern border, Texas, California, Arizona, right? And they were given a notice to appear, which looks something like this. This is like a warrant for arrest kind of thing, right? Immigration saying that we have detained you, here is your warrant, and here is when you have to go to court. But the reason we think this slide is important because when these community members come to Seattle or Washington, my apologies, we need to make sure that the court is also in Washington, right? So for example, let's say that the interaction with whichever law enforcement happened in Texas, right? So when that person is given the notice to appear, the NTA, which is the next slide I just showed, will probably have a court appointment in Texas. But that person has since moved to Washington, right? So we just need to make sure that the person is aware that they need to check and make sure that their court has also been transferred to Washington. And if not, they should do so. They should do a change of venue. And this website and 800 number is, is where they can go to check and see where their court is being held currently. And the next one is appointments with ICE. If there are appointments, the committee member has to try to keep them, and here is where they go to make sure that they know exactly when their appointment is. That's both the website and the phone number. I'm sure you must know this, but just a heads up that in Washington state, everyone can get a state ID or a driver license, and they should. All right, we discussed the warrant. So in the next 3 slides, we just want to discuss a little bit about everything that the administration has threatened to do on day one, mass deportations. So what can they do in the beginning of the new administration, and what can't they do? And then we are going to briefly discuss how will our Washington state immigrant community fare. All right. So we are going to start mass deportations on day one. It's not going to happen. They neither have the manpower nor the infrastructure in place to engage in immediate mass deportations. It's a lot of this is a scare tactic, and we just want to make sure that our committee members know. I'm not saying down the road they're not going to try to do this, but it's just very unlikely that they will be able to do this soon, just because they don't have the infrastructure in place to do this. Having said that, we do want community members who have orders of removal to be careful and definitely do the family planning that Josh was talking about, just because their information is already in the system. And, ICE knows about them, and I can just go to their house. It doesn't need to be a mass deportation, it's just individualized. Now, if and when the administration starts work start rates and tries mass removals, we want the community to be empowered in knowing that they can still not trample on their constitutional rights, right? So, for example, before it used to be in Trump 1.0, it used to be, they would do this stormtrooper style tactic. What a whole bunch of them would show up at work sites, like fully armed. It was a horrible experience for community members. But and if they do show up, they do need to have like an individualized suspicion of who is deportable. They cannot just say, oh, the color of your skin or your accent gives me enough reason to detain you. That's not possible. And actually, I'm just going to talk about number 2, but just to say, we will challenge all of that. And here is how you all can help. Please call, I believe this is the WISA number, 844-724-3737 to report raids in your communities. If you are detained, please call NERP. Our phone number is here. And if you want to know more about raids in your community, please text either ICE or MIGRA to 509-300-4959. This is a WISN phone number. WISN is an amazing community organization and an amazing partner, and they are very involved with responding to raids. So please reach out to them. And make sure, again, family planning becomes really, really important. All right, so that's about mass deportation and worksite rate, right? The other thing that Project 2025 was talking about is taking away birthright citizenship. And you know, they can talk about it, but nothing immediately is going to happen. They can say they will. For one thing, it's a constitutional right, right? So it's going to be immediately challenged. So nothing is going to happen in, you know, like in the next, I don't know, month or two. There will be a lot of threats, that's all. But we just need to empower our community members to not get scared. All right, what can the new administration do? They can expand the expedited removal operations. So expedited removal is the summary expulsion process. You know, generally speaking, our immigrant community, like all of us, have due process rights, but these due process rights are not necessarily enforced at the border, which is how this happens, right? Currently, the administration has limited the expedited removal to community members who entered the country within 14 days of being apprehended and were apprehended within 100 miles of the border. The new administration can expand this, right, to its statutory limit, which is 2 years. So, you know, they can start expedited removal processes against anyone who has been in the United States for 2 years or less and is within 100 miles of the border, which is really like most of the country. So this is not the case yet. So nobody should worry about this yet. But if you hear that expedited removal process operations has expanded, then you will want to let the community members know to actually carry documents demonstrating that they have been in the United States for 2 years or more. And then some other programs, you know, executive orders like DACA and DALE are, of course, on very vulnerable grounds. DACA, as we know, is currently before the Fifth Circuit. We expect a decision within a few months. We don't expect the decision to be a positive one. And then the question is, like, will it go to the Supreme Court? Likely, will the Supreme Court take it? And then the decision of the Supreme Court. And then DALE, I don't know if many of you are familiar with it. It was another executive order, deferred action for labor enforcement. This is for people whose labor rights was violated. So they could apply and obtain an employment authorization and deferred action. And then there are other forms of relief that may be impacted. But these other forms of relief, you know, whatever is not a statutory right, like DACA and DALE, will be much more impacted than statutory rights, right? So temporary protected status and Violence Against Women's Act and U visas and T visas, these are statutory, right? So the government cannot just take them away. What they can do, for example, with TPS, they can say that, you know what, we are no longer going to designate any country. It's within the Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security's right to say, no, we are not going to designate any country to have TPS beneficiaries. Or for VAWA, U visa, and T visa cases, they can just make it really difficult for people to apply for these forms of relief, right?
Hey, Mojda.
Yes.
I don't want to interrupt you, but I do want to prompt that we only have 15 more minutes and there are quite a few questions to get to. So I'm wondering if we could maybe end on this slide to give some time for Chach to
Oh my God.
To ask you questions.
Sure, but can you give me just and I was talking fast too. Give me just 5 minutes to go through the rights.
Okay.
And then yeah, I will stop
Awesome.
at 1:20, I promise.
Okay.
Okay, so sorry, you guys. okay, hold on. Just know that Keep Washington Working is Washington state law that is awesome. And will protect our immigrant community members in Washington state. Okay, let's talk really quickly about our rights. So everyone has the right to remain silent. Everyone has the right to be safe in their home, in their car, on the street, or at work. Everyone has rights to labor protection, have rights to due process. Everyone has a right to gather peacefully. And of course, everyone has a right to equal protection. Now, let's quickly talk about each one of these rights. Home. So if immigration wants to enter your home, they need a court order from a federal district court. Now, most times, ICE agents come to your door and they show you this warrant. This warrant is just a warrant issued by ICE, not by the federal district court. It is not valid. Don't open the door. If they do have it, make sure that they have your name and they have the correct address. Knowing that we are in Washington state, the federal district court judges will likely not sign such orders, so just don't open the door if they come to your door. I know it is frightening, but we need to let our community members know of their rights. Okay, this is the difference between the two. So the one on the left is signed by a federal district court, and the one on the right, can you see, warrant removal deportation by ICE. This one is not valid. Nobody should do anything about it. Do not open the door. If it's on the left, then yes. You always have the right to remain silent. Please don't answer any questions. Please don't sign anything, and please do not provide immigration with any documents unless they have a warrant, in which you will have to. One thing, please do not provide false information, and please do not provide false documentation. Just don't provide anything. You have that right. Don't provide anything, but don't provide false ones. And constantly let the person know, hey, where's the warrant? Am I under arrest? If I'm not under arrest, I want to leave and leave. Same workplace protections, right to be paid for your work, right to leave work after work hours, and right to workers' comp if injured on the job. And here's the community resources we were talking about. As I said, LCYC and NERP share a lot of similar resources. WISN has this fantastic resources page in multiple languages, so please visit WISN. And WISN is really on top of it when it comes to rates. And then protect immigrant families, as Josh also mentioned, nonprofit agencies that do immigration work, and then private immigration attorneys, AILA. And then if you have non-immigration legal question, please go to WashingtonLawHelp.org. And thank you. All right, I think I talked really fast.
Okay, Mojde, we have some questions for you. Okay, this one was in Spanish, so I might have to translate your answer, so you're going to have to give me a minute. If you're already in the settlement process, married to a U.S. citizen, and ICE detains you, can they deport you?
No, you have a petition pending, right? Assuming that you are married and your spouse submitted a petition for you, you have a pending petition, and you go to court and you let the court know that they have this pending petition and I just need additional time to allow you a CIS to adjudicate this application.
Okay. Si ya estás en proceso de arreglo, casado con un ciudadano americano y te llega a detener ICE, pueden deportarte. Dice Mojde, si estás en proceso, entonces tienes que decirle a la corte que estás en proceso, y si estás casado con un ciudadano americano, explícale a la corte y no te van a deportar. Can they take away my citizenship by naturalization status?
No. Okay, so here's the thing. There are really, really rare instances where, and yes, this is one of the things that they have threatened to do, that they're going to have really this new, like, subchapter in USCIS that just deals with taking away people's citizenship as if they don't have enough to do. But no, I mean, they have to find that there was some kind of fraud, right? That you obtained your citizenship when you did not qualify to obtain your citizenship. So generally speaking, no.
Okay, what protections do students have when attending school? What message can a school district give families to help them feel safe?
So, I mean, we want our community members to feel safe and to do what needs to be done, right? For at least for now, there is the safe, sorry, I keep forgetting the name.
Sanctuary.
It's like, no, not the sanctuary one. That's the problem. The sanctuary is the Washington State, but the federal government have this safe zone, right? Like schools, places of worship, hospitals, courts are places that ICE does not go to because they want actually people to feel safe to go to these places, right? Now, this is an administrative policy. It can be taken away. Nonetheless, it hasn't yet. So there is that. And even when it does, I remember last time we had, I started going to state courts, trying to pick up people from state courts, and Washington State Supreme Court sent notice that you cannot do this. You cannot instill fear in people and prevent them from coming to their hearings, right? So, I mean, there will be litigation if something like this happens.
I would like to know about sanctuary cities. Can you say something about that?
Okay, so in Washington, we have keep Washington working, right? I mean, in a way, that's Washington's sanctuary state law. What KWW says is that, hey, listen, our local law enforcement cannot cooperate with ICE or CBP to enforce federal civil immigration laws, right? If any sort of makes sense. I mean, does our law enforcement help federal law enforcement in doing for tax violators or whatever? So there is that, right? But besides that, sanctuary city, I think, does not have an exact definition, right? It is sort of Washington State saying we value every single member of our community, right? Hence, we will not enforce federal immigration civil violations. That, however, does not mean that the federal government cannot enforce it, right? So just because, I don't know, King County Sheriff is not enforcing it, doesn't mean that ICE cannot come and pick people up.
Okay, I'm going to read this in Spanish and then I'll ask you in English. ¿Cómo reportar abogados que toman casos, cobran y nunca te contestan las llamadas? How do you report attorneys who take cases, charge you money, and never return your phone calls?
I mean, you can go to Washington State Bar Association, right? And complain.
Yeah, and that's WSBA.org.
Okay. Thank you, Judge.
At the moment of court appointment, can people ask the judge to postpone immigration court to find a lawyer?
Absolutely. And people do this routinely, right? But one thing to note is, okay, so this is, your first hearing before the immigration court, right? Or your second hearing, you can say, hey, listen, I just need more time to find an attorney. But if it gets to your third hearing and your fourth hearing and you are still asking for a continuance in order to find an attorney, the immigration judge may be a bit more impatient.
Is there any risk to undocumented people coming to Washington State Court to file cases? For example, a family law case, and could this trigger negative immigration consequences?
So if documented committee members come to Washington State to file family law cases, and how would
Yes.
that impact their, if they're a document, like, for example, a green card holder, let's say, right?
If there's, so basically an undocumented person goes to Washington State Court.
Undocumented, sorry.
Yes,
Sorry,
to
sorry.
file family law.
Okay, no. No,
And I would say no in the courthouse.
Right.
Outside of the courthouse, the parking lot, around the corner, we can't guarantee anything.
right.
If a document person is pulled over, can ICE officials ask the person to provide driver's license, registration, etc.? If so, can they detain the person if they do not, for example, have a reason to detain?
I mean, for one thing, why is an ICE agent stopping for a traffic violation, right? But let's say this is at the border or around the border and we have CBP. They can ask. That doesn't mean that the person needs to answer, right? So yes, that. So don't answer. Definitely do not provide false information. But you do not need to answer just because somebody asks, a law enforcement officer asks you a question, right? You have a right to remain silent. And you have a right not to provide documentation. Definitely do not provide fake documentation. I mean, and keep telling the person that you wish to speak to an attorney. You refuse. Are you free to go? Because you want to go. You don't want to answer these questions and you want to speak to your attorney. And then if they do detain you, and it is possible that they may, call her.
Okay, this one's in Spanish. Quisiera saber si la visa T también es una temporal estatus y cuánto tiempo debe pasar para obtener a su total legal estatus. I'd like to know if the T visa is also a temporary status and how long does it take to obtain full legal status?
And so T visa is by itself a temporary status, right? It provides you status under T visa and employment authorization for a period of 4 years, I believe. But a person in either T or U visa statuses can apply to obtain their lawful permanent residency green card after 3 years in status. Actually, T visa has an exception where you can even file faster.
Would someone on DACA fall under lawful permanent residence status?
No, they do not.
Do people with a 10-year ban have a deportation order?
Do people with a 10-year ban have it? I'm not sure. I mean, you can have a 10-year ban without having ever come into contact with immigration law enforcement officials, right? And the 10-year ban can get triggered when you apply for something. So I'm not quite sure what the question is asking here. Feel free to email me separately, by the way. Mm-hmm.
Yes. Okay. Can you talk more about safe zones around schools? Is there a perimeter, a distance around the school grounds where parents cannot be detained? ICE previously set up around schools and neighborhoods.
To be honest with you, I'm not sure like if there is a perimeter, right? But I know that as a general practice, they're not going to go in the parking lot or around schools. Because that would be threatening, right? That would feel threatening to the children. But I'm not sure of any specific perimeter.
Yeah, I think if I recall from last time, Mojdeh, that it's as long as it's a school property in the parking lots and what have you, they would not go.
Yeah.
Where do asylum seekers, those that do not yet have asylum status, fall in the category of statuses?
So if they have a pending application, they have a pending application, right? And after 150 days in that particular, after 150 days have passed, since they submitted their application, they can apply for employment authorization. So they just have a pending application.
And if you enter the US and ask for asylum, then formally apply for asylum, are you still considered undocumented, or is asylum applicant, or is the asylum applicant your status?
The asylum applicant is your status.
Great. Okay, I think we're running out of time. Maybe I'll do one more. What if you're in the process of getting citizenship through marriage but are undocumented still? Can they deport you during this process?
If you are in the process, you should continue with that process. And chances of the new administration trying to deport you, I mean, you are not the low-hanging fruit. We suggest that anybody who clearly qualifies for any form of relief, they should apply for it. Better to have a pending application than to have nothing at all.
Okay, Mojde, we've reached our time at 1:30. I want to
All
thank
right.
everybody for coming to the webinar. Thank you, Mojde, and all our tech people. We really appreciate it. Please be safe and share this information as much as possible.
Yes, thank you, everyone.